Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. was and still is considered by the majority of boxing fans as the greatest Mexican fighter in history. He had a stellar record of 107 wins, 6 losses, and 2 draws, with 85 wins come by way of knockout. He won 6 world titles across 3 different weight classes. He set a record for the sport's largest attendance of 136,000 fans attending his bout against Greg Hagen. He had the most title defenses in a row of 27 title defenses, the most title fights of 37, and the most title victories with 31. He was a first ballot Hall of Famer and one of the greatest fighters in our sport. On February 16, 1986, 19 years prior to Chavez Sr.'s retirement, he had his first child, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Chavez was taken to the gym many times as a child by his father, Chavez Sr. He decided to follow his father's footsteps and become a boxer. He had an extremely brief amateur career, taking on Jorge Paez Jr., another son of a quality boxer, twice, with those being his only amateur bouts. On September 26, 2003, Chavez made his pro debut, taking on Jonathan Hernandez. Chavez won the fight by a unanimous decision victory. He continued his momentum, having a stellar record of 23 wins, 0 losses, and 0 draws, with 18 wins come by way of knockout within only 2 years. Chavez would take on Carlos Molina in the 6-round bout. Molina is infamously known as an awkward fighter who makes his opponents look bad throughout his career, but this was a young Molina, and this is the first time he did that against a fighter worth of note, putting the first blemish on Chavez Jr.'s record, outboxing Chavez and making him very uncomfortable throughout, but not getting the decision, however. He still did, however, put that blemish on Chavez's record, getting the fight to a draw. Matched 2 months later, and Chavez wrote his wrongs and edged out Molina deservingly to a majority decision victory. After beating some more journeymen, Chavez took on Michigan's Troy Rowland. It was a routine victory for Chavez, outfighting Rowland to a wide unanimous decision victory. In the post-fight testing, however, it was revealed that Chavez had tested positive for a banned substance. The fight was changed to a no decision, the victory was removed from his record, and even with Chavez not getting truly penalized for testing positive, it didn't change that this would be an early red flag for Chavez in his career. Chavez did not hold a major world title of any kind, but it's clear he was aiming for the WBC middleweight title, fighting in eliminators and fighting for less significant versions of the main WBC title. At the time, Sergio Martinez was the WBC champion. He was mandated to fight Sebastian Zbik, but HBO was against the fight, so Martinez agreed to step aside. In a controversial and quite honestly slimy turn of events, Martinez was stripped of his WBC title, and on June 4, 2011, Chavez was scheduled to fight for the belt and against guess who? Sebastian Zbik. Chavez was already getting preferential treatment early on in his career, and even before he was a champion. Zbik was a decent European-level fighter. He was undefeated, and throughout this bout, we saw that Zbik wasn't the pushover opponent that HBO was portraying him as when he was supposed to fight Sergio Martinez. The fight was an all-out war, a truly entertaining and close battle, with both fighters giving it their all for 12 rounds. After the final bell rang, we went to the score totals. Judge Steve Morrow had the fight scored 114 to 114. Raul Caiz Jr. had it 115 to 113, and John Keane had it 116 to 112. For your winner by majority decision victory and the new WBC middleweight champion, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Chavez has won his first real title. Many fans had Zbik winning, but it was a truly competitive fight that could have definitely gone either way. 5 months later, Chavez made his first title defense, taking on fringe contender Peter Manfredo. This fight played out the way close to everyone expected, with Chavez dominating and battering Manfredo before stopping him in the 5th round. 2 months later, Chavez would take on Mexican veteran Marco Antonio Rubio. Rubio was expected to be one of Chavez's toughest opponents, and fans were expecting an all-out Mexican battle, and they were correct on both. Rubio brought the fight to Chavez, throwing bunches of punches. Chavez, as expected, throwing just as many of Rubio and trading throughout the bout. It went the full 12 rounds, but the difference was Chavez's size, youth, power, and strength, as he beat Rubio by a competitive but clear unanimous decision victory. 4 months later, Chavez would take on his most talented opponent to date, rising star Andy Lee. Most people were picking Lee to win this fight actually, and early on, Lee was proving them right, outboxing and outfighting Chavez early. But by round 3, Chavez had adjusted to Lee, slowly starting to pick him apart and break him down, as well as push him back. And in round 7, after slowly dissecting Lee, he hit Lee with a gorgeous hook that put Lee on Queer Street. He followed up and got the TKO victory in the 7th round. Throughout Chavez's entire career, this was his best career performance. The beef with Sergio Martinez was ongoing, and after more and more buzz for a potential fight between the two, HBO finally pulled the trigger and made the fight for September 15th on HBO pay-per-view. It was for Chavez's WBC middleweight title. The belt they stole from Martinez and gave to Chavez was on the line for this bout. After exciting build-up as expected, it was time to fight. Prior to the fight, it was apparent that Chavez wasn't taking this fight seriously, and Freddie Roach, his trainer, was getting very frustrated with him. This played a part in the bout. It was embarrassing. It was a masterclass from Martinez. Through the first 11 rounds of the fight, it was arguably one of the biggest schoolings in recent history. Chavez lost 11 rounds decisively, losing in every criteria. He was getting outworked, outfought, beaten up, pushed back, and humiliated. However, Martinez did get reckless in round 12, recklessly trading with Chavez, and Chavez capitalized on it, hurting Martinez badly and dropping him hard. Martinez was badly hurt, and there were glimpses of Chavez Sr., his father, versus Meldrick Taylor, where he got the iconic and historic last-second knockout come-from-behind victory. But as we know, Chavez Jr. isn't his father. Martinez survived the onslaught and actually outfought Chavez after recovering. He survived the round and won a very wide, unanimous decision victory, even with the knockdown. Maybe if Chavez trained a little harder, he could have had the potential to finish off Martinez in this bout. Chavez took a year off from boxing. He moved up to super middleweight to take on fringe contender Brian Vera. This was Chavez's comeback against a decent fighter, but a significant underdog. Vera was the better fighter that night, winning the fight on most fan scorecards by a few rounds. The judges obviously didn't care about what they saw, as they gave Chavez the very disputed unanimous decision victory. They would rematch 5 months later. This time it was apparent that Chavez was taking Vera more seriously. He corrected nearly all of the mistakes he made in the first fight and beat Vera convincingly, getting the decision victory. I consider this Chavez's most underrated performance of his career. 1 year later, Chavez took on Polish contender Andrzej Fonfora. Fonfora was a very dangerous fight for Chavez. He lost a very good fight against Adonis Stevenson, a very good fighter, a weight class even above 168, 11 months prior. He even dropped Stevenson. Chavez needed to be on his A game to pull this one off, and he wasn't. He was getting beaten up throughout the night and throughout the fight, and at the end of round 9, something that has never happened to Chavez in his career happened. He got dropped for the first time in his career. Fonfora is a big puncher and was his biggest opponent in size for Chavez, but this was still unexpected, mainly because Chavez has always had a respected chin. He beat the count and survived the round, but quit in his corner. This is the beginning of his career truly spiraling out of control. Chavez won his next 2 fights against relatively unknown opposition by unanimous decision victories in both bouts before getting a massive opportunity of taking on Canelo Alvarez. Chavez and Alvarez have always had a rivalry throughout their careers, many even thinking that Chavez was jealous of Canelo's success throughout his career. Chavez didn't have to win this fight. All he had to do to potentially revive his career was give Canelo a decent fight, win a few rounds, make Canelo have to work for this victory. Chavez failed at doing that, having one of the worst game plans in modern history, being the bigger, much slower, and less fundamentally sound fighter trying to outbox Canelo. He failed miserably, got pummeled for 12 rounds, and lost a very wide decision victory, losing every round on all 3 judges' scorecards and on every fan's scorecard. 2 years later, Chavez returned to the ring to get a first-round KO against a heavily overmatched opponent, and 4 months after that, Chavez would get another big opportunity, as he is now set to take on elite super middleweight Danny Jacobs. Chavez didn't make the same mistake he made against Canelo when fighting Jacobs. He used his size and brought the fight to Jacobs, and it looked like maybe Chavez had turned back the clock and has used his time out of the ring wisely to make the changes he needed to. He was arguably up after 5 rounds as it was very competitive throughout. However, he failed. After 5 rounds in a pretty close fight, he had a broken nose and decided to quit in the stool. The ref did not stop the fight, the corner did not stop it, and the doctor did not stop it. Chavez won it out. 9 months later, Chavez would take on Mexican prospect Mario Caceres. Chavez was favored to win this bout, but throughout 6 rounds looked flat and got outboxed before a headbutt caused the fight to go to the scorecards. Caceres was crowned the winner by technical decision. 9 months later, Chavez would take on UFC legend Anderson Silva, who was 46 years old. Somehow, Chavez screwed this up. He fought a 46-year-old MMA fighter and still got outworked and lost a split decision. Chavez's last fight was 4 months ago against a journeyman where he won a unanimous decision victory. Chavez's poor work ethic, poor discipline, and lack of motivation cost him a potentially great career. He had a run prior to facing Martinez that showed he had the natural ability along with all of the assets, but deep down, he didn't truly want it. Still, we should give Chavez some credit. He had a lot to live up to, and he did accomplish a lot more than the average son of a boxer. But it's truly unfortunate that he never utilized on his potential.